So that's a thing, like for me, and I mean, we talked a lot yesterday about this, but I personally believe that I'm a very one-dimensional fisherman. And
Hmm.
more just because I've eased the access to like the rocks in my area is easier. I do have access to estuaries very easily as well, and sandy beaches too. But I don't know, when I first started out fishing, I just started on fishing off the rocks. And my whole like big major goal for this next season is to learn how to fish in the estuaries. And because you are, you know, I mean, you that's where you primarily fish, and we fish very similarly, just like you fish in a
Yes.
whole different environment than me. So I would love to just, pick your brain about like fishing in the estuaries a bit.
Absolutely. Pick my
Yeah.
brain, ask me anything. I'm an open
Hmm.
book, man.
Yeah.
Again, it
So,
took me over 20 years to learn the stuff that I learned. So,
mhm,
if I can help some people get on some fish earlier than that and
mhm.
not take that amount of time, happy
Yeah.
to do so.
Yeah, and so one of the biggest things when like I'm first starting out in estuary and really fishing in any location, what I'm looking for is like where do you start? Do you want to look for current breaks? Do you want to look for wind blowing on shore? Like where would you start when you're going and fishing on an estuary?
So whenever I'm scoping out any sort of new spot, it's always low tide. And
Hmm.
it's low tide because we can see structure. We can see mussel beds that pop up above the water. We can see boulders that may hold fish. We can see little, because again, when that current's moving, you're seeing that rip. You're seeing where that rip's going to go. Because towards the end of the tide, it's moving pretty fast.
Yeah.
So you want to find rips. You want to find almost like sandbars where it's very, very shallow, and there's like this, like kind of, I want to say less than maybe 2 inches of water, and then
Yeah.
it dips into these sort of pools.
Hmm.
Um, any sort of structure like that, and approach, again, you can't see these things at low tide. I have this, it's funny because a lot of people will be like, oh my gosh, you pulled this fish out of the water at
Yeah.
at low tide and this low of water.
Hmm.
And it's like, okay, let me phrase this to you differently. Let's look at this place when it's high tide,
Hmm.
and the water goes from 3 feet and this skinny of a channel, like a very skinny channel, to now it's dispersed over this large area.
Hmm.
It's like, now I don't know where to fish because I'm throwing randomly, into this giant body of water. Whereas at low tide, you get these skinny little channels and stuff that forms, and where the fish are because they're not obviously on all this area that's really just filler area like
Hmm.
sand and just the stuff that shows during low tide, if you will.
Hmm.
But yeah, from there, I tend to put on a mask and goggles. I don't do that
Yeah.
all the time.
Hmm.
Specifically where I fish in Maine, I had to throw on a mask and goggles to find out what they were eating,
Hmm.
what they were hiding behind. Like, dude, I had no idea that bass were ambush, feeders
Yeah.
initially. Like, until I see them, like I'm watching these fish from a bridge and they're swimming behind a pillar, and I'm watching these schools of sand eels just get pushed that can't fight the current.
Yeah.
I'm watching these fish come out from the pillar,
Hmm.
swipe and eat these, all these sand eels, and then just go right back to the pillar. And it's super energy efficient for them,
Yeah.
if we're thinking from a natural selection standpoint, these
Hmm.
guys aren't using a ton of energy,
Hmm.
and they're waiting for the food to come to them, and then
Hmm.
they're going right back to that less and less expenditure in terms of
Hmm.
energy. um, but again, I'm sorry, that was a long-winded answer.
No, 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 no. That's great.